Hey, it's me again, Drew Garino here to bring you Week 11 of the NFL season. Very bittersweet victory for our good friend Bud Ahern, who was able to stave off Adam in the Monday night matchup to take his sixth victory of the season. He stands right now in fifth place. We have Dennis, also with a 6-4 record, in fourth place. Cam also has a 6-4 record. He is in third place, so we have a big logjam there as teams are fighting to get into the playoffs. We have Ryan maintaining his pace at the top of the League of Legends standings, now at 9-1 on the season. Quick recap of last week. Tough one for me, going 2-3 on the week, bringing my overall record to 33-12. Let's not waste any further time. Let's get into the action this week. We have 4-6 Sean Doolin off a tough loss last week. He faces off against Steve, who comes in with a record of 2-8 and is hoping to avoid the pink shirt. Looking at Sean's team, we have Mike Evans at Philadelphia. Excellent matchup. Mike Evans has been on a little bit of a tear recently. He's starting to develop that rapport, if you will, with Jameis Winston. So I like Mike Evans this week to have a big game against Philadelphia Eagles on Sunday. Staying at the receiver position, Randall Cobb is a guy who really has struggled the last couple of weeks, much like the Green Bay offense. In his last 3 games, he has not totaled over 56 yards receiving. Hard to believe. He is the clear number 1 receiver for the Green Bay Packers. With Aaron Rodgers now getting banged up, Minnesota's playing pretty good ball. It is on the road. I don't know if I like that matchup there for Randall Cobb and the Green Bay Packers this week. Looking at Steve's team, in the Crapfest Bowl 2015, the Tennessee Titans face off against the Jaguars tonight, but a guy I really like this week, Allen Robinson. Had a touchdown again last week. He's had a really nice season thus far for the Jaguars. Tennessee is banged up right now. They just put Jason McCourty on season-ending IR. Allen Robinson will have a good week for the Jaguars tonight. On the downside, C.J. Anderson is facing off against the Chicago Bears on the road. I know for a fact that Steve regrets that deal he made with me. Sorry about that. C.J. Anderson has really fallen out of favor in the Denver backfield. Ronnie Hillman appears to be getting that leg up on him right now. Denver's kind of a mess right now on offense. Certainly Peyton Manning is not playing, so there's that factor. There's a lot of reasons why C.J. Anderson, to me, is not a guy that you really want to be starting for your fantasy football team. Looking at the matchup as a whole, I don't see any way Sean is going to be losing this game. He will get his 5th victory on the season and keep his playoff chances alive. Next matchup we have is 6-4 Dennis versus 3-7 Dave. That was a tough loss for Dave last week. Really ended his postseason playoff chances. But looking at Dennis's team, a guy I really like this week is Danny Woodhead. He is facing off against the Kansas City Chiefs on Sunday. With all the injuries to the Chargers wide receiver core, really got to think that Danny Woodhead's going to be essentially a receiver for the Chargers moving forward. So I like for him to catch a lot of passes out of the backfield this week, and it starts this week against the Kansas City Chiefs. A guy on the downside is a guy that Dennis acquired a few weeks ago, Stephon Diggs. He faces off in a big game for them against Green Bay. Favorable matchup, however, Stephon Diggs has really been invisible the last couple of weeks. He's had 7 points in each of the 2 games that he's played in. I don't really like the trend there. I don't know. The key to the Minnesota offense is certainly Adrian Peterson. If he's going, that offense is going to go. Peterson's playing very well right now. Green Bay can't stop a nosebleed. So Peterson's going to have a good game. I just don't think Diggs will have a good game for the Vikings. Looking at Dave's team, Dez Bryant had a good game last week with Matt Castle. This week, he's getting Tony Romo. Certainly an upgrade at quarterback. Very favorable matchup, even though it's on the road. It's at Miami this week for the Dallas Cowboys. I think Dez is going to have a big game on Sunday. It's going to really make Dave happy. I know he's feeling the blues a little bit. He may not make the playoffs this year. Dez Bryant, that's going to cheer you up right there. Dez Bryant, that's the guy. On the downside, staying at the receiver position, Dante Moncrief faces off against a pretty tough Atlanta defense right now. Certainly there's some injuries there for the Colts in terms of their quarterback. Matt Hasselbeck is starting for them this week. I don't love Dante Moncrief's chances of having a big game on Sunday. Looking at this matchup as a whole, Yahoo actually predicts Dennis to lose this one. However, I'm going to take Dennis to win this one. I like what he's got. I think Larry Fitzgerald's going to have a good game for him. Certainly Danny Woodhead, I think, and then Adrian Peterson, as we already talked about. So those three guys, I think, are going to be the good base that Dennis needs to get this victory and move to 7-4 on the season. Next matchup we have is Bill, who's actually won 3 in a row after a pretty rough start. He faces off against Bud, who comes in with that record of 6-4, as we talked about a little earlier. Certainly Bud is definitely banged up right now, but is still has a great shot at making the playoffs there if he can just string together a couple more victories. Looking at Bill's team, a couple weeks ago, he picked up Danny Amendola. Certainly that was a big pickup now with Julian Edelman out of the lineup. He's in line for a big game on Monday night against the Buffalo Bills. Patriots offense is certainly going to look a lot different moving forward, and I think Danny Amendola is a guy that you can really trust. He's played very well since that playoff game against Baltimore last year. I like Danny Amendola. I think he's going to be a relevant fantasy contributor for the remainder of the season. Now, when you try to find a down player for Bills roster, really not many guys that you can come to. I'm going to go with Tyrod Taylor, probably the weakest of the bunch. He, of course, faces off against the Patriots in that Monday night game, as we discussed. Last time he played the Patriots, he had a pretty good game for fantasy purposes. He had almost 300 yards passing and 3 touchdowns. A lot of that was garbage time numbers. Certainly, I think the Patriots are a little bit tighter in the secondary than when they last played the Buffalo Bills in Week 2. And I think that's going to really limit Taylor's ability to have a big fantasy day on Monday. Looking at Bud's team, a guy I really like since he's acquired him in trade has been Jonathan Stewart. He's been pretty solid. He had a touchdown last week, almost 100 yards rushing. Faces off against the Washington Redskins at home. That's certainly a game that the Carolina Panthers should win. So that means Jonathan Stewart should get the bulk of the carries in a clock-running situation. Now, looking at the downside, there's a lot of guys on Bud's team that you go with in terms of guys that you don't want to start on your fantasy roster this week. So I'm just going to take one. I'm going to take Vernon Davis at Chicago. Certainly the element of Peyton Manning not being in the lineup hurts. Really, Davis is still new to the team. He hasn't developed a rapport with his teammates at this point. I thought he would assimilate himself into the offense quicker than he really has. So I'm going to take Vernon Davis to be my down player from Bud's roster this week. With that being said, I'm going to look at the rosters here. You look at the projected total for Bud's team right now. It's just not where it needs to be. Bill's team is certainly riding high. He's got a lot of good plug-and-play guys. Amendola, Langford, West. I'm going to go with Bill to win his 4th game of the season. Next matchup we have is 4-6 Adam, who faces off against Cam, who right now sits in 3rd place at 6-4. Looking at Adam's team, Antonio Gates, coming off some injuries. They had a bye week last week. We already talked about the Chargers being banged up in the wide receiver department. So that means Antonio Gates should have a pretty big game. It's a pretty good matchup for him. Kansas City's playing better, but I still think he's going to find a way to get a lot of targets. He's going to find a way to get a lot of catches, and he may even find the end zone for Adam this week at the tight end position. Looking at the downside, Matt Jones had a huge game last week. Certainly is against a team in the Saints that is just god-awful on defense. They finally fired that fat piece of crap, Rob Ryan. He is awful. But Matt Jones this week faces off against Carolina. It's on the road. They should be down in that contest, so I don't think Matt Jones is going to have a big game for the Redskins. Certainly nothing close to what he did last week against the Saints. Now, when you look at Cam's team, really a guy that was on a lot of people's radar going into the season, projected very high, one of the best at his position. That was Travis Kelce. Travis Kelce has really not been utilized the way he needs to be utilized. He really has a lot of great strengths that can help that offense and help that quarterback in Alex Smith. This is finally the week where he's going to have a good game. This is the one. He's got a great matchup. He's at San Diego. This is the one. I know Cam's been distraught there. Travis Kelce's not come through for him. This is the week, Cam. Hang in there. This is the week he's going to have a good game. Looking at the downside for Cam's team, Chris Johnson, he's had a pretty good year. He's really gotten a lot of mileage out of some pretty bald tires, if you will. Chris Johnson faces off against the Cincinnati Bengals. Big game for both clubs in the Sunday night game. It is a home game, which is nice. Cincinnati has a pretty strong run defense. They do a pretty good job against the run. Their defensive line is pretty strong there with Atkins, the guy with the crazy hair, whatever, all those guys. So I don't think Chris Johnson's going to have a big week for Cam's team. But I don't think it's going to matter. I think Cam's going to win this one. He's going to make that push towards the playoffs, and he's going to win this one to move to 7-4 on the season. Next matchup we have is the matchup of the week. It's myself at 7-3 versus Ryan, who comes in with a record of 9-1. Another victory for him last week. Is this a potential playoff matchup? We shall see. First, looking at my roster, a guy that Sean probably wishes he had on his team at the moment, Devonta Freeman. It's a guy that really didn't think that you're going to get a lot out of him this year. Tevin Coleman was the guy. Tevin Coleman gets hurt. Freeman plays very well. Freeman's been kind of, in the middle recently. They did come off a bye, but I love the matchup. They're playing against the Colts this week. I think this is an opportunity for him to find the end zone. Could see him catching passes for the Falcons. So I like Devonta Freeman to have a nice game this week. Looking at the downside, a guy on Drew's team that's really been a good contributor until last week, that's Alshon Jeffrey. Alshon Jeffrey's dealing with a groin injury right now. He did not practice today. Still questionable in terms of his availability for Sunday. They have a very difficult matchup. It is a home game, but they're playing Denver. We all know that the Denver secondary is certainly very strong. Talib is going to be back in the lineup after poking out Dwayne Allen a couple weeks ago, so he's back. So I don't love the matchup there for Alshon Jeffrey, especially because he's dealing with that injury. Looking at Ryan's team, another guy who's dealing with an injury. He didn't have a great game last week until he found the end zone. I think he's going to be good to go this week. Marshawn Lynch faces off against the San Francisco 49ers. It is a home contest. This is a great rebound opportunity for Lynch and the Seahawks. I like for him to have a big game. I don't care that he's hurt. I could see him having a really strong game for Ryan's team. A guy I'm going to put in the down category is a guy that I put in this category before. Every time I put him in this category, he comes through with a big game. This is finally the week where I really believe he's not going to have a good game. That's Martellus Bennett, tight end, Chicago Bears. Faces off against the Denver Broncos. We've already talked about their secondary. Cutler, I could see him having a 3-interception game. Cutler has been kind of 2 steps forward, 1 step back. This is that step back. He's not going to have a good game this week. Martellus Bennett, a guy that really, he's been good this year, but not great. And I think that's a weak spot right now on Ryan's team, if there are any weak positions currently for our 9-1 top of the standings member. When you look at this matchup as a whole, it's going to be close. It's projected to be very close. Drew is slightly favored in this one, but there's a lot of guys on Ryan's team that really could explode at any moment. Lynch, Gurley, Phillip Rivers. There's a lot of guys there, so I'm going to go with what we know. Ryan's 9-1. His team has overperformed, in my opinion, to some degree. I think that's going to continue, and it's going to roll right on through to the playoffs. So I'm going to take Ryan to win this one. He's going to move to 10-1 on the season. So there you have it. It's certainly crunch time in the League of Legends. There's a couple of guys on the outside looking in right now, namely Adam, Sean, Bud. Will they make late season runs? Can Bill somehow wind up in the playoff picture? He's playing pretty good right now. And then Dennis, Cam, Drew, Ryan, can they hold on to their spots? Well, we all know Ryan's making it, but what about those other 3? Are they going to make it? We shall see. And Bud, I hope another guy doesn't bite the dust.